Hi, I'm Bob Hill. I'm the president of the Church of Scientology, Mission of Riverdale at 308 Broadview Avenue in Toronto. This is the 27th sermon during the coronavirus that we're bringing to you. The topic of today's sermon is how to choose your friends. Scientology is a practical religion. It teaches a person how to know. That's what the word Scientology means, knowing how to know. Why are some people ill more often than others? Why are some people accident prone? Is there a reason others live their lives on an emotional seesaw? Doing well one day and badly the next. Today, we will look at how the bad or good choice of friends or associates can influence a person spiritually and lead to their state of being. Suppression is a harmful intention or action against which one cannot fight back. Now keep that in mind. During war, the taking away of rights by force is an example of suppression. In school, a child may have suppression from a bully that they cannot handle. You've seen that. To suppress means to squash, to sit on, to make smaller, to refuse to let reach, to make uncertain about reaching. Now, an example about reaching, for example, could be you have a teenager. He's 17 years old. He's gone to high school, and at the end of high school, or towards the end, he says, you know, what I'd like to do for a living is become a bricklayer. And his parents very quickly say, well, why do you want to do that? You need to go to university. You need to get a degree, etc., etc. When what he really wanted to do was be a bricklayer. So he goes ahead and he decides, I'll go to university. So he spends 5 years because mom and dad want him to do that. And he learns nothing. In fact, he rebels when he's in university. He comes out, he's lost those 5 years. He may or may not get back into construction, but one day he's going along and someone says, hey, would you like a job working in concrete and brick? He grabs it and then he accelerates. However, his reach was cut earlier. When he finds that he can do it, he becomes very happy and life becomes very pleasant for him. Another example, an artist is happily reaching out with songs or paintings. He's told, well, that's not very good. A prime example of that would be Mozart. He had an antisocial person who got around him. He wrote music, and the antisocial was constantly criticizing his music. So he became less and less certain of himself, and in fact, he got quite ill. You can look that up in the history books if you like. Today's sermon is based on the writings of L. Ron Hubbard from the Scientology Handbook, Chapter 11, The Cause of Suppression. In this chapter, you will find the characteristics of the antisocial and the social personality. Now, we're going to take up only a couple of the traits today. In later sermons, I'll take up others. Antisocial means inconsiderate to society, or not caring about the needs of neighbors or society. An antisocial is a suppressive person. Social means preferring to live as part of a community, naturally operating on the greatest good for the greatest number. Now, I'm going to give you a specific example of that I saw just within the last couple of weeks. I happened to have gone on a short vacation into the far north where survival within the group was very important. In other words, if you were contributing to survival while you were there, you were helping others who were around you, and they were contributing to your survival. There was one individual that came into the camp and he had antisocial traits, and his intention was not necessarily good towards the other guys in the camp. Well, they quickly picked up on it and they tossed him out of his lodgings and told him they didn't even want him around him. The lesson to be learned in that is that people who are in that kind of environment where you have to rely on others for survival do not necessarily tolerate that kind of thing around them and that kind of person. And that particular individual was shunned. Now, in a different setting where you have social veneer, where a guy can kind of slip through the lines with that, he can get away with it, and you see that in the bigger cities. However, in that environment, it's magnified because you need to have people around you to help you to survive. Okay? Now, we're going to look at some of the antisocial and social features or characteristics that make them recognizable. In choosing your friends and associates, your best chance for happiness and stability is to be with people who are social. Okay? Regarding the antisocial personality, L. Ron Hubbard discovered in his research that there are certain characteristics and mental attitudes which cause about 20% of a race to oppose violently any betterment activity or group. Such people are known to have antisocial tendencies or traits. You got it? So there's about 20% of the race that oppose these things violently, and they oppose betterment activities. And they have certain traits. Now, one of these antisocial traits is he or she speaks only in very broad generalities. They say, well, everybody thinks that way, or everyone knows, and such expressions. These are in common use, particularly when imparting rumor. When asked who is everybody, it normally turns out to be one source, and from this source, the antisocial personality has manufactured what he or she pretends is the whole opinion of the whole society. You got it? Now, the problem with this antisocial is he can get into certain media lines, and when he does, he then spreads his generalities throughout television or radio or any other forms of communication, and that can become very intimidating to the general population because they don't have any stable information. The social personality, on the other hand, is specific in relating circumstances. Joe Jones said, the Star newspaper reported and given sources of data were important or possible. So they will give you true datums from direct sources that are important and are possible. He sometimes may use the generality of they or people, but seldom in connection with attributing statements or opinions of an alarming nature. You got it? So the social guy, he doesn't necessarily want to give you a generality. Now, do you have friends who are specific and give you exact sources of their information? Have you ever heard something on the news that is so general and alarming that it is disturbing? Just getting all the data from a good source can be very calming. Do you know someone who often uses generalities? It can be very annoying, and you want to pick friends who are specific in their communication. So try and stay away from those guys that give you a bunch of generalities. Another antisocial trait is such a person deals mainly in bad news, critical or hostile remarks, invalidation, and general suppression. Now you can see that in our society. The amount of bad news that's pumped into us almost on a 24-hour basis is ridiculous. However, the good news is left set aside and you don't really hear about it. The social personality is eager to relay good news and reluctant to relay bad news. He may not even bother to pass along criticism when it doesn't matter. He is more interested in making another feel liked or wanted than disliked. Do you know people who are often giving you bad news, often critical, and putting you and others down? You may have experienced it yourself, where you had a lapse, where you felt critical, and you just, complained and made nattery comments, let's say. Nattery is critical. And you just kept doing that. Did you feel better after that? Just ask yourself that question. Spend a whole day being critical and tell me how you feel at the end of the day. I would think you're not going to feel too darn good. Do you have friends who reassure you and give you good news and encouragement? You probably do. Now, I apply that in my work area. I run quite a few guys in a company that I run in construction. Now, construction work is very difficult and it can be very physically tiring. So what I do is I encourage my guys, and when they do a good job, I tell them, wow, you did a great job. Now that approval and acknowledgement to them is actually more important than the money they're making, and they feel grateful. And they'll tell me, well, thank you so much for saying that, because it's not often they get acknowledged. In choosing your friends, look for these positive traits and surround yourself with people with social tendencies. Okay? So on that note, I'm going to read to you the creed of the Church of Scientology. Now, we could actually consider this a very social document because it doesn't invalidate, and it gives you certain rights that will help your survival. Okay? We of the Church believe that all men of whatever race, color, or creed were created with equal rights, that all men have inalienable rights to their own religious practices and their performance, that all men have inalienable rights to their own lives, that all men have inalienable rights to their sanity, that all men have inalienable rights to their own defense, that all men have inalienable rights to conceive, choose, assist, or support their own organizations, churches, and governments, that all men have inalienable rights to think freely, to talk freely, to write freely their own opinions, and to counter or utter or write upon the opinions of others, that all men have inalienable rights to the creation of their own kind, that the souls of men have the rights of men, that the study of the mind and the healing of mentally caused ills should not be alienated from religion or condoned in non-religious fields, and that no agency less than God has the power to suspend or set aside these rights overtly or covertly. And we of the Church believe that man is basically good, that he is seeking to survive, that his survival depends upon himself and upon his fellows and his attainment of brotherhood with the universe. And we of the Church believe that the laws of God forbid man to destroy his own kind, to destroy the sanity of another, to destroy or enslave another's soul, to destroy or reduce the survival of one's companions or one's group. And we of the Church believe that the spirit can be saved, and that the spirit alone may save or heal the body. Alrighty? Now, often, a social personality is so mired down or stuck in his own difficulties that he cannot see improvement as possible to him. His setbacks and travails or hardships are just life, or that's the way things have to be. He has no inkling that such a thing as antisocial personalities exist, or that one or more were making life miserable for him. If you find you have suppression in your life, remember that it comes from an antisocial person or persons, and that it is a harmful intention or action against which one cannot fight back. Thus, when one can do anything about it, it is less suppressive. Handlings can be simple, like spotting who the antisocial personality is and not talking to them. Very common in the north where I was, they just get cut off. Start by looking and listening and deciding what type of people you want to be around and make your life better. Alrighty? Very good. I will now read to you the prayer for total freedom. May the author of the universe enable all men to reach an understanding of their spiritual nature. May awareness and understanding of life expand so that all may come to know the author of the universe, and may others also reach this understanding which brings total freedom. At this time, we think of those whose liberty is threatened, of those who have suffered imprisonment for their beliefs, of those who are enslaved or martyred, and for all those who are brutalized, trapped, or attacked. We pray that human rights will be preserved so that all people may believe and worship freely, so that freedom will once again be seen in our land. Freedom from war and poverty and want, freedom to be, freedom to do, and freedom to have. Freedom to use and understand man's potential, a potential that is God-given and God-like, and freedom to achieve that understanding and awareness. That is total freedom. May God let it be so. Now, you can join us next week for more ways to improve your life. There's going to be a phone number and an email address you can look at, and you can get copies of the books on the information we just talked about. Alrighty? See you next week. Thank you.